like about the episodes of Pardon the Interruption on ESPN, Mike Casey, is they usually start the show with the guys just kind of bantering. They're laughing about something that the audience never gets to hear about. That's kind of cool, I think.
Well, we were laughing about Brian Mendez and his exorbitant contract demands. He wants his own star trailer. He wants a staff of 20. He wants a clothing allowance. We're like, shut up, dude.
I really wish our listeners could watch the soap operas that play out in your head because they sound really entertaining. If this is your first time listening to This Week in Cleantech, this is kind of what it's like. We bill it as a roundup of the week's biggest stories you need to know about in climate and clean energy in about 15 minutes or so. Today is Friday, April 4th, 2025. I'm Paul Gerke, Content Director of Factor This. I'm joined as always by Cleantech commentator and my foil, Mike Casey of Tigercomm. Today we got a special guest on the horn too. Cat Clifford from Cipher News will be joining us shortly. But first, Mike, we'll start with the pleasantries. How's it going?
It goes well, my friend. I want to give a listener shout out to Eric Misbach from EDP North America Distributed Generation. And I got to say, I'm bummed that we weren't posting on April 1st. We could have done spoof stories such as John Engel leaves Clarion, becomes Elon Musk's spiritual advisor. Sia's Abby Hopper announces Yellowstone's Rip Wheeler will keynote RE Plus talk on the role of toxic masculinity in solar sales. ACP's Jason Gourmet quits job to become Greenpeace activist, and Energy Secretary Chris Wright discloses he's actually Sacha Baron Cohen's latest character.
Okay, the last one. The last one.
We can't do those. But we can't do those.
Those aren't real
because
stories.
it's not because it's April 3rd we're taping, and so we have to be boring and do our usual show.
You know how they say in show business, when you tape on the 3rd for a show on the 4th, you can't make jokes about the 1st. That's just a common axiom. So I guess we'll have to abide by it. It's not that I didn't think those jokes were funny, by the way. It was just your delivery. Don't rush. Lean into it. Speak with your heart. Come on, man. Believe in your comedy. Anyway, I also want to give a shout out to the other listeners, the ones who we didn't, give names or make jokes about. We know you're listening to, and the silent listeners are, in fact, my favorite. The ones that don't tell us that there's something wrong with the show or that Mike Casey should do X, Y, or Z. Appreciate all of you, whether you contact us or not. If you want to see a certain story on the show, you can request it, paul.gerke@clarionevents.com. We are going to talk about stories. It's not just the Siskel and Ollie show up here. Mike, number one story of the day. What do you got?
Serious time. Pam Radke, Floodlight News. U.S. electricity prices are surging. These Louisiana companies want out, Paul Gerke.
I'm glad this is number one. I thought this was maybe the most impactful story this week. We republished it on our Factor This sites. The gist of it is that electricity prices are going up everywhere in the U.S. Out here in Jersey, where I live, we just got saddled with another 20%. I know Dominion just put out a press release this week. I think they're projecting 15% or more across the board. Now, it's really bad in Louisiana, Mike, as you may know, and they want out of this monopoly utility model. Entergy Louisiana being the monopoly there. They're saying they could see a 90% increase in base electricity rates between 2018 and 2030. Yeah, that's pretty significant. Driven by the needs we all talk about on this show frequently: rebuilding aging infrastructure battered by extreme weather, climate change supporting data centers, mass electrification, and so on down the line. The Large Energy Users Group, which includes companies like Dow and ExxonMobil, is saying, hey, wait a minute, we don't want to pay 90% more in base electricity rates. So they're proposing to generate or buy their own electricity, especially with renewables, and just bypassing Entergy entirely, which doesn't have a ton of renewables in its system. Louisiana industries consume more than 40% of the state's total electricity, so this would put a significant dent in Entergy's business. The Large Energy Users Group also needs to acquire more renewable power to meet environmental mandates from companies or clients. You may not hear the word state included in there because Louisiana's state goals not nearly as ambitious as some of those companies' personal and company goals. The Entergy Louisiana, no renewable power in the system pretty much, despite permission from the Regulatory Commission to acquire 3 gigawatts of it. Maybe that'll go somewhere, maybe it won't. Mike, what did you think of it?
I think utilities are arguing that letting industries generate power on their own would shift costs to residential and commercial customers who would be left footing the bill for infrastructure and storm recovery. I take no sides in this debate, but I must say, Mr. Gerke, this framing sounds eerily like the arguments made against net metering that led to the loss of tens of thousands of solar jobs in California.
Yep.
Just saying. Meanwhile, residents are already paying up to $28 per month in storm-related surcharges on top of regular rate increases. Story number 2, Mr. Gerke.
Our second story by Justine Kalma at The Verge, entitled "The Trump Administration Could Greenlight Deep Sea Mining for the First Time." Mike, what do you know about deep sea mining?
I know that, one, it is opposed by scientists, environmental groups, and some policymakers who are worried about the impact of mining on the ocean floor. The target of the mining is polymetallic nodules. Say that 10 times fast, Paul.
That's what I was looking for down there.
On the seafloor that are rich in metals like nickel and cobalt, important materials for the clean energy transition. So, an outfit called the International Seabed Authority is currently working to develop rules for the practice. 160 countries have ratified this treaty, but not the U.S. Now the metals company, otherwise known as TMC, is turning to the Trump administration to support deep-sea mining efforts since the U.S. is not part of the ISA rules and is looking to roll back environmental protections. I don't know what could possibly go wrong because no one eats seafood here, Paul Gerke.
I feel really strongly about this. I've got some more wordy things to say, and then I've got like a really simple way to put it. So the wordy stuff first. The Deep Sea Conservation Coalition, along with about 30 countries, are pushing for a deep sea mining ban. There's a lot of reasons for that. Some research suggests it might release dark oxygen or disrupt deep sea ecosystems and natural cycles in ways that we don't even begin to understand. Still, a draft executive order backing TMC's plans is reportedly bouncing around within the Trump administration. And that report would support mining in international waters on the basis of a loophole, Mike, that the U.S. didn't ratify, that United Nations Convention on the Law of Sea. More simply on this, haven't we disturbed ocean ecosystems enough? Like, it just seems like we're intent on killing everything that lives in the oceans at the cost of what? Can't we find minerals on land somewhere else? And especially for the U.S. to use a loophole and not ratifying a treaty as the justification for this makes me feel particularly sick. That's all I've got on it. Mike?
Well, maybe the TMC CEO will buy a $28 million mansion like Mark Zuckerberg did here so he can camp out in Washington and get things from the administration. Hey, I'm just saying. Our third story, Stan Cho from the AP News, titled "Dow Drops 1,400 Points as U.S. stocks lead worldwide sell-off after Trump's tariffs ignite a COVID-like shot." Mr. Gerke, your thoughts?
So you already pulled back the curtain and showed The Wizard of Oz and revealed that this Friday show is being taped on a Thursday. So I'd like to add that we're still in the midst of this free fall. The TV in my living room is still pretty much red. It's like pretty entirely red. It's been there all day. If you haven't been watching it or monitoring it, maybe Friday the Dow's up 2,000 points and someone's laughing at this, but I doubt it. I sincerely doubt it. Global financial markets took a huge hit Thursday following that big tariff announcement in the Rose Garden on Wednesday night. The S&P was down around 4% at midday. The Dow flirting at 1,400, 1,500, 1,600 points down. The NASDAQ shed more than 5%. A lot of renewable energy stocks and energy utility stocks in the U.S. in particular just bleeding 7%, 8%, 10%, 12%. The new policy, if you didn't hear about it, good for you, and I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but it puts a minimum 10% tax on all imports and a lot higher rates on specific countries, including China, which is now at like 54% total tariff, Japan, EU nations. UBS analysts say this move could slash U.S. economic growth by 2 percentage points this year alone, pushing inflation back up close to 5%. In almost every asset class, it's felt the impact, Mike. We're talking oil, tech, even gold prices. Bitcoin was down $4,000 or $5,000 earlier. It just feels like bad news bears all the way around.
Well, I'm going to say I'm looking forward to the birth of a new U.S. green tea industry because that's what I drink, and I think that it's going to make
about
green
to throw
tea
it into harbor is what I'm about to do.
This piece notes that the worries of stagflation have the stock markets across the board down, with 4 out of 5 stocks that make up the S&P 500 down. And I got to say, it was really hard to pick the terror story today. There's so many sector-specific stories to choose from, such as, here's one in the New York Times: how Trump's tariffs could hobble the fastest-growing energy technology across the country. Companies have been installing giant batteries that help them use more wind and solar power. That's about to get much harder. We could just go on and on. And so I think, Paul, you really said it right. I think the real outcomes are yet to arrive here, and we know that China and the EU are already preparing countermeasures. We've talked about how the uncertainty around these tariffs is so disruptive, particularly in the clean energy technologies, because it makes it hard for businesses to make long-term plans, especially hard when you're a relatively young sector. So, Paul, our fourth story.
Before we get to the fourth story, I want to say one final piece on this, Mike. The tariff situation, it feels like, and it probably feels like this abroad to both our allies and adversaries, that the United States has given up. We've given up on the clean energy dream. We've given up on that sort of utopian economy and lack of carbon emissions, because China has kicked our ass so soundly and up and down wiped the floor with us to the point of embarrassment that we're going to jack up tariff rates so high that we're just going to do our own thing. We've decided to take our ball and go home. And that's the second thing on the program that I can say makes me physically sick. Our fourth story. Ashley Nelson at the New York Times titled "Pension Funds Push Forward on Climate Goals Despite the Backlash." Mike, you read this one. What did you think?
I'm not going to mention any names, but I'll note that some banks and investment firms and masters of the universe have been profiles encouraged by running away from net zero networks at the first sign of politicians barking on little tasty cues from the fossil fuel lobby. However, the public pension funds are staying committed. After Trump's reelection, a New York City pension fund joined a global climate action group for long-term investors. These funds have been using their power to push investment firms and companies to keep working toward climate pollution reduction goals. In some cases, they're even moving their money to European firms. Some American banks have pulled back from climate action altogether. Paul Gerke, what do you think?
You know, when you got to go offshore with the funds, we're in a bad state of affairs here, Mike. And we're not talking
Indeed.
about your offshore gambling accounts. Even though some energy prices and politics are making it harder for companies to stick to their climate goals, those pension funds are trying to keep pressure on, stepping up because many asset managers they rely on are not fully considering long-term climate risks or planning for future climate scenarios. Mike, I want to save as much time as possible for our special guest, so hit us with story number 5.
Our last story is written by Cat Clifford of Cipher News. Geothermal is the rare renewable energy winning favor in Trump's America. Cat Clifford, welcome to the show. And if people haven't read your piece yet, which we want them to do, what is the big takeaway?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really glad to be on the show and talk about this reporting. I learned a lot reporting this story, so I'm glad to share. There's been a lot of changing dynamics in the energy landscape with the new administration, and a lot of renewable energy maybe hasn't been getting a whole lot of favorable light, but one exception to that is geothermal. Chris Wright, the energy department's, the head of the energy department, has been really publicly supporting geothermal, saying it's something that we need to be investing in, and this is a resource that we should be tapping. It's worth noting that before Chris Wright was the energy secretary, he was the CEO of Liberty Energy, and in that role, he led Liberty Energy. When he was leading Liberty Energy, they led an investment in Fervo, which is one of the leading geothermal startups. So it's really interesting to see this support, and there's a few reasons for that. Number one, geothermal is really able to leverage the technical and workforce expertise of the oil and gas industry. So the technology that is used and the skill sets that are needed to tap geothermal energy are very, very similar to the oil and gas industry. And we in the United States, we certainly have one of the most robust oil and gas industries, and we have a huge advantage there in our deep expertise in oil and gas. So that's one answer. Another reason that geothermal is getting interest right now is because it's baseload power generation. So that's always on. If you want to think about nuclear is another example of baseload power. Natural gas is also a baseload power, obviously not clean, but the advantage of geothermal being a baseload power is that it can be a potential power source for data centers, which we know the demand for data centers is going up and to the right. And there's a study by Rhodium showing that 2/3 of data center demand could be met by geothermal if the the developments in the technology and the reductions in the cost continue as is expected by 2030. So there's a lot of really momentum behind this industry, and it's really notable to see the support from Chris Wright and the Trump Energy Secretary, the Trump Energy Department.
Kat, I know that Rhodium report, among other things, points to there being a lot more potential for geothermal in the United States than maybe we initially thought, and that's a trumpet that startups like Fervo have sounded pretty frequently. In your reporting, did you find that to be the case, that this may be a more ubiquitous clean energy source for the United States, maybe in a way that we hadn't considered it before?
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's sort of also one of the developments with the new technology, enhanced geothermal systems. So traditional or conventional geothermal needs to be in a location where you have access to underground water, so you can get steam. But enhanced geothermal systems use fracking technology, again, leveraging oil and gas expertise to crack open the rocks and then be able to access geothermal power even when you don't have those steam and underground water resources. So that means that with this new fracking technology applied to geothermal, the amount of the country where you can tap into geothermal increases exponentially. It's really wild to see. And there's even further, so there's sort of this next generation geothermal, enhanced geothermal systems. There's even further, I guess you would call it super deep, super hot geothermal, which is a startup called Quaise, which I talked to for this story, is working on. It's still not commercialized yet, so that they're still in the pilot research phases, but they're developing even drilling technology that can go hotter and deeper. And if you can, the hotter and deeper you go into the earth with this drilling technology, the more of a footprint, there's more of a footprint of the country where you can, and the world. I mean, I'm talking about the United States here, but this kind of technology would allow and enable baseload power in exponentially more places than the conventional geothermal technology has allowed.
Paul, we're just about out of time. We have to go to our Cleantecher of the week.
All right, let's get to the Cleantecher of the week. Tom Weirich at EDP Renewables hosted a terrific Transformers Summit for those who checked it out. He's put on this summit for 3 years in a row. Congratulations, Tom, our Cleantecher of the week.
And I want to thank our wonderful producer, Brian Mendez, and Alex Peterson and Claire Quirin for helping gather these stories.
Special thanks to Cat Clifford for stopping by this week in Cleantech. Subscribe, give feedback, share story suggestions. Let us know how your portfolio's looking. Mike, the nice thing about those Sage Geosystems, I hear if you keep digging, you'll get all the way to China. And then we can figure out what they're doing for clean energy over there, because I hear they're kicking our ass. All right, guys, we'll see you next week.
All right, Paul Gerke.